gmail.com. Enjoy the show. Good evening. Welcome to the BS and Beer Show. BS stands for Building Science. If you haven't been here before, tonight we're going to talk about communicating high performance details. Obviously something I'm really passionate about as an architect. We've got 3 great designer architects on tonight to walk you through how they communicate their details, especially the tricky ones. And tonight I am having a sparkling white wine because after I mentioned last week that we volunteer, nobody sent me beer. I don't have any. So BS and Beer is a independent grassroots movement. We all volunteer our time, including our guests, to come on and keep this going every week. So we appreciate you guys showing up. Fine Home Building and Green Building Advisor are our media partners to make sure that this can continue to happen every week and gets posted up on our YouTube channel. So thank you to them for helping us make this happen every week. Let's see here. We also want to thank all of our audience members for joining in to chat with us on the show. It's hard to follow the chat box and to keep the show going. Tonight's agenda: guest introductions. Got 3 great guests, panel discussion, followed by audience questions. If we don't get to your audience questions, please follow up on Green Building Advisor afterwards and after the show. Mike, do we have any announcements tonight?
Yes, thank you, Emily. First and most important, tonight I am drinking a Marsh Island Brewing Pulp Truck IPA. My friend Bob Morrison, who may be watching, looks like he's not, but he often does, dropped off a few very special beers for me. It's a lovely New England style pale ale. Where are we? So just a few quick Zoom things. Everybody's familiar with Zoom at this point, but if you're seeing Kylie's floating Fine Home Building box somewhere, there should be a way to hide non-video participants to clean up the screen. If you're new to BS and Beer or the BS and Beer show, there's a parallel discussion in the chat box. So open up the chat. We do not pay attention to raised hands, but we do try to pull out questions and comments from the chat box. So there's a button at the bottom of your screen for that. A Zoom quirk is that in the chat box, you have to click all panelists and attendees, or else only the panelists will see your question, and we like for the conversation to be public, so please click all panelists and attendees. I'm gonna skip a few of those. Events, Skills USA is an organization dedicated to closing the skills gap. Bill Robinson is looking for industry professionals willing to help with judging projects across 30 to 40 states for one day in June. If you're interested in helping, please email him and we'll post his email in the chat. Every Friday, Mark Willie and Dave Cooper host BS Fridays. The BS and Beer Brew Crew, the 4 of us, will be their guests on February 19th. So if you want to hear more BS, tune into that and tune in every Friday. I know Steve and maybe Alexandra were on sometime recently. If you haven't listened to Emily's podcast yet, E3 with Emily, check it out. She has conversations with a lot of interesting people in the building and design world. Last but not least, book club. On April 1st, we will be reviewing, this isn't going to show up very well, Building Science Essentials from Jacob Diva Recusin. We'll post a link. The publisher, New Society Publishers, is giving everybody giving BS and Beer people a 25% discount on their entire Essential Building Science series. So pick up that book and we'll have Jacob on April 1st to talk about the book. That is it for me, and I will turn it over to Travis to introduce tonight's guests.
Thanks, Mike. Good evening, everyone. Nice to see you again. I'm Travis Brunyard in Kansas City. Tonight, I'm drinking a Bethlehem Bar Raspberry. This is a sour ale with raspberry, white chocolate, and granola with almonds, but I haven't cracked it yet. I got to keep it together for the introductions. Someone's got to be a professional around here. Come on. I have the great privilege of introducing our guest tonight. I'll start with Steve Baczek. Steve is a friend of mine. He's a registered architect, Are you gonna deny me that pleasure, Steve? You gonna
knock yourself out, man? You're killing it. Go.
Fake news? Come on, man. Steve is a registered architect with over 20 years of construction industry experience. Many of Steve's architectural projects have been Building America demonstration projects featuring a systems approach to building durable, healthy, comfortable, energy efficient, and environmentally responsible structures. Steve's primary focus is new construction of high performance homes. He has done extensive work in the areas of architectural renovation and building systems re-engineering. And that's all sounding very professional, but his greatest accomplishment is probably sitting to his left, our right on our screen. You want to introduce your partner there, Steve?
Yeah, everybody, this is Alexandra. So you see her, Instagram, Alexandra Baczek. She graduated from Roger Williams last spring, and she's come to work with me. So we're tearing it up, having fun together. It's a privilege to work with her.
Lexi, how much scotch do you have to drink to tolerate working with Steve all day?
Listen to me. I'm telling you right now, I'm going to hang up if everybody starts shitting on me because I had enough of it already.
Now we're off to a good start. We can move forward. Speaking of shitting on Steve,
she says,
Armando
good morning.
Cobo
I say,
is
you're
our next
fired,
guest.
Travis. She walks in the office, says, good morning. I say, you're fired.
That's a good way to start every day. Our next guest is Armando Cobo. He is a zero energy custom home designer, trainer, and building consultant with over 35 years of experience. Armando designs following the guidelines of DOE's Zero Energy Ready Home Program, the Building America Program, Build Green New Mexico, California's Title 24, National Home Builder Association's Green Building Program, and Lead for Homes, among others. Although based in Texas, he works all over the country and was an excellent guest at last year's Building Science Symposium. Nice to see you again, Armando. Hello. What are you drinking tonight?
Yeah, thank you. I just had my latest lemonade brew 15 minutes ago. So I can't handle liquor anymore.
You're falling apart down there in Texas?
It's all downhill. After 60, it's all downhill.
All that horrible Texas barbecue.
Steve, you got my back. Well, that brings us around to Barry Price, who's been our guest before on the show. He's an architect working in the Hudson Valley area. He designs homes that take inspiration from the beauty of the landscape. His houses integrate modernism with high-performance building techniques and regional materials. He seeks to create stunning yet restrained high-performance homes that have minimal environmental impact. And I would say, from what I've seen, Barry, you do that very well. How are you tonight? Nice to see you. Thanks for coming back.
Thank you. It's good to be here. You want to know what I'm drinking, don't you?
Absolutely.
So this is a Fire Tower Red IPA brewed right here in the Westkill Brewery in the Hudson Valley, and I'm enjoying it.
Fantastic. I see you have your guitar with you. Are you going to serenade us a little bit tonight or no?
No, I was supposed to move that. Sorry. Maybe another time.
Oh, man, I was stoked. I guess we'll have to hang on. That's what do
maybe,
they call
maybe
that?
after this, we'll see.
Fantastic. Well, I'm grateful that you all were willing to join us tonight. And I think at this point, we're ready to kick off the show. Are you, Barry, are you starting us off?
No, I think Steve has a presentation. I heard him.
I just four little slides.
Well, don't keep us
Kylie
waiting,
limited
Steve.
me
Show
to 2, so I brought it down to 4.
Do we have
I have some I can show if it'll help, but I'd like to see what Steve has.
Yeah, mine's.
I like to steal Steve's details. Come on, Steve. Tell me what you got.
All right. Let me share this up here, guys.
Get the Sharpie out.
Hey. It's right there, buddy.
Big red?
Steve is not responsible if any of you draw on your screen tonight with Sharpie.
There you go. There you go. So I'm assuming you can see that, everybody?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. So the first thing that, I tell everybody is that a lot of people don't quite understand, but drawings are the roadmap or the language that the industry speaks, right? So it's architects write the language, builders interpret the language, and it's kind of multi-level. So there's the idea that, okay, you need to understand that this is a 2x6. You need to understand a plan from an elevation and a section and all of that somewhat fundamental stuff. But when you're dealing with high performance homes, it's really important that you understand what all the pretty lines mean, right? the lines of water management, the lines of the air barrier, the thermal barrier, the vapor barrier. And sometimes this language doesn't get quite written as much as it should be written. And a lot of times it doesn't get interpreted as much as it should get interpreted. So as an industry, we're sometimes in this bind of how do we present that information? How do we go about giving that and that translation, right? So that being said, page down here. You know, this is it. Sometimes there's slides. This one here is, I call it the slider section. It's basically multiple. I use it to have conversations with builders, homeowners, etc. It's a wall section that can be any one of probably 30 different wall sections. It all depends on the different sizes of the framing member, the relationship of permeable cavity insulation to impermeable cavity insulation to exterior rigid insulation. So this one isn't so much a construction document as it is a learning tool to have that conversation with a builder or with a homeowner to help them get an understanding of where we are, where we want to go, what are our goals here, and more so, how do we make educated decisions about the wall? A lot of us do remodeling work, right? Whenever I do remodeling work, I never just show where we're going. I think it's extremely important to show where we've been so that we have that mix of old and new and put them together so that people have a really clear understanding of what are we doing here and how are we enhancing or renovating that older version. When I do construction drawings, it's not uncommon sometimes when the details get too muddy for me to draw what I call a set of twins. And these are exactly the same detail. They're exactly the same project, same roof eave, exactly same condition. It's just on the left, I have what I call the air sealing detail, or the detail that takes everything through the framing stage. And the detail on the right is everything that comes after the framing stage. So it's really important that the framer gets all the beads of sealant, where the air barrier is, if in fact that's part of the framing scope. But the framer doesn't need to know what the beaded soffit is or the fascia condition or the metal roof. That's stuff that comes after him. So I want him to be able, or her, to be able to concentrate on their scope of work. And so a lot of times I'll have that detail, and this isn't two details drawn, it's just layer manipulation and freezing different layers so that we get a certain amount of information per this detail, a certain amount of information for the next detail. And then lastly, this is one that I just did. This is a project. It's a very large house on the coast. I have an inset there of just a really small section of the foundation plan. It's the footprint was probably close to about 3,500 square feet. But the thing about this house is the elevation had a lot of different wall elevations. It had different door openings. It had grade lines that we had to meet. It had certain footing elevations. And you can see in the inset here, all of that stuff is in here. I have top of wall, top of footing, all of it, where the step in the footing is. But it's really easy to overlook some of that information. And when you're building a house, in any house, I shouldn't say building a house of this scope, but I actually built the elevation in Sketch, or the foundation in SketchUp. And then I put all of the dimensions. So you have all the dimensions of different things happening, like to grade line, grade to top of foundation wall. All the blue elevations mark either the top of the elevation wall, top of footing, bottom of footing. The numbers in green those delineate what the grade elevation is at any of the corners. And so I call these a foundation cheat sheet. And the builder was extremely happy to get these. He got, I don't know, I think I sent him about 11 by 17 sheets all around the foundation. And it was very clear to them, as well as myself. It made drawing the foundation plan real easy. That I invested, it was probably about 4 hours or so to invest that time into the SketchUp model. But having that understanding, and we all know concrete, you get one shot at it. And the last thing you want to tell somebody, with their 7,000 square foot house is, oh, we poured that section of the foundation wrong, right? So this is something that in the future I'd use depending on the complication of the foundation, but it worked really, really well for this section of the project to break that out and use something other than just that standard 2D plan, 2D section to bring it to 3D life and put those cheater numbers on there. So with that, I'll turn it back. Go ahead, Armando.
I was gonna say, Armando, why don't you share your screen as well, and then we'll. Mike and I are already.
I just got colors. One, man. That's all I need.
I got my Sharpies, but I've been trying to figure out a whole word to put in my computer, and I can't find
Welcome
one.
To the 90s, Armando.
Okay, so I'm going to share a screen here.
I still love you like a brother. You know that.
Can you see it?
There you go.
Okay, so I kind of took the process through kind of going more in general through the whole process and of what is it, the details that I want to convey on the job site. And so one of the things that I always told my clients is that the plans are not drawn for them, even though they pay me, but it's basically more for the subs. They're the ones who need to understand how to build a house. And so to me, that is just critical. Also, I've always said that if the critical details to frame a house or to build a house are not on the drawings, the chances of doing it right is greatly diminished. And I like to show my project goals on the first page of the plans, because in that way, it's one of those deals that, it puts everybody on notice. This is what we're trying to do. This is what we want to do. One of the things that really bothers me a lot in our industry is that people don't have a clue about codes. And for anyone who hasn't seen, I mean, I've already ordered my 21 code, but I think it's in the mail or something. But that I've seen the presentations that ICC's done and so forth, and there's quite a bit of changes. So for those people that don't know what's coming, there's quite a bit of changes that is happening right here in the building envelope and the mandatory requirements. The one thing that I've always complained about the codes is that I always feel that the laws of physics do not care what code you use. And unfortunately, a lot of people use the performance codes to cheat. And this was something that I learned from Joe 25 years ago and never forgot about it. And so I design homes in climate zones 2 to 5. I believe that people that are in our business, if we're going to call ourselves professionals, we need to know how to do point permeability analysis on all our projects. You can use ASHRAE fundamentals, which is pretty simple. This is a Excel sheet that I created many years ago, and I use it. But you can also use DOE's program. You can use WUFI. And at the end of the day, people don't understand that even codes tells us, okay, look at you know, chapter 7 or chapter 8, and it'll tell you how much insulation you need to use. Well, it doesn't tell you that the house settings may be at a higher temperature or higher humidity. So you're kind of screwed if you're not designing prepare for that. Here in Texas, it tells us that we're supposed to do our work on based on temperature of 68 degrees in the wintertime. But at the end of the day, most houses that I go to, people have their temperature in the wintertime at 72s and 74s and whatever. And so I'm sure that happens in many other areas. So I think people really need to know that. And based on that, I put for every single house, I put a detail of each wall assembly. And this is a typical wall assembly I do on climate zone 3, which is more than what it really is required in our climate zone. But I know that we're always every 7 years or 8 years, we're going to have climate like what we have today for a week or two, where our temperatures are below, you know, or they're under freeze or freezing temperatures. And so I'd rather protect my clients through that. But if you don't know, I mean, climate zones 4 to 8, I mean, they now improve the code, especially in 4 and 5. Same thing goes to the roof assemblies. And, you know, for us, R49 is going to be a step up, you know, because there's still people doing R20. I mean, as you guys well know, many people are using the performance code to put 5 inches of open cell foam on a conditioned attic, and that is going to be way below code, you know, 40%. I don't think I want to risk my clients with that type of performance. And then same thing, it goes to foundations. We don't do a lot of basements here in Texas. Just a few, but right now I'm doing a house in Illinois, another one in Missouri, and I'm getting ready to start one in Michigan. So, you know, these are things that if you design in different climate zones, you better learn how to figure out not only the code, but figure how to do all your dew point analysis and so forth. Same thing now, unfortunately, as you guys well know, in the 2021 code, now all the climate zones 1 through 8, they're requiring 5 air exchanges at 50 pascals. And I think that's sad. I've always felt like if you're a builder and you can get 3 air exchanges at 50 pascals, you need to go and do something else, because you can get that fairly easy. But, you know, I guess nobody pays me for my opinions. So, and then, you know, we always try to include different details that are pertinent to that particular plan. I don't want to flood the plan with details, because then you scare away a bunch of subs that don't want to do that. But there's some that are very important to me. As a high performance house, we need to know how to install windows properly. And so I'll have a detail, you know, for stucco walls, another one for brick or stone, and another one for siding. And sometimes, you know, we'll have one for, you know, panel siding. Sometimes we'll have one for clapboard siding. And so I just think that you need to show the subs, you know, the steps to do things right. And as a high performance house, HVAC to me, is the second, after building envelope, is the second most critical thing, and it really never gets done right. As you guys well know, 3 months ago, I made another presentation, and I show that it took the largest HVAC company in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex 4 times to finally get it right. And so it's something that we have to deal with it. And unfortunately, the industry, the HVAC industry, is not too keen on making sure that their members are educated. And of course, our building industry, most people don't have a clue. And so I have to get involved, making sure that my trusses are designed with the chases. I'll make sure that everything lines up. I'll make sure that the manuals are done correctly and so forth. Same thing. This is a detail I showed 3 months ago. Single story house. I got the fur downs. I even had the detail for the fur down, and yet still they designed 3 times all the ducts in a ventilated attic. So how that happens, I have no clue, but it's really frustrating. So,
And that fur down looks mighty familiar. Just saying.
Sure. I've just been doing it for 20 years. So I probably learned that from you or Joe or Betsy.
Wow.
So, and then, this is a typical sheet of mine. I put details in there and some instructions on how to get things done correctly. And then on elevations, we do the same thing. I'll include the details of the windows and the siding, how it needs to be installed. We put where the solar panels goes. We make sure that there's no penetrations in that area on the roof. And so it's about, teaching, people how to do things that the next guy that comes after them, it shouldn't have much of a problem. And then here's the one thing that I just don't get it. We keep building the same house in the same place year after year after year. What I found out is that it costs between 0.5 or 0.5% to about 1 or 1.5% to take a house and design it going from EF1 to an EF3. And so why not? Same thing, like Houston. Houston was, they started building houses in Houston 200 years ago, and it floods every year. And they keep building the same house in the same place every year after year after year. I'm sure everywhere else around the coast, they do the same thing. So at some point, I really think that coach needs to look at, making sure that resilience is part of the code. And I know it's supposed to come up on the next cycle or two, but let's just hope it does. And then lastly is, I've been preaching about this for 10 or 12 years, all the work we're doing, and yet builders and homeowners are not getting the full benefit of the work we're doing. Why? Because builders are not putting custom homes in the MLS system, because there's the comparables are not there. And I mean, you can go on and on and on, but then at the same time, you go and try to find, like, for example, believe it or not, here in Dallas-Fort Worth, there's not a single appraiser that is certified to appraise houses that are with this energy efficient addendum. So the only choice that we have is that either the builder or I or the homeowner has to fill it out, give it to an appraiser, and hope that the appraiser can give a better valuation. But we're leaving about 10% on the table just because we're not following through, and just because appraisers are not doing like what they're supposed to. So these are my key elements of this talk, and hope you guys agree with me.
Armando, thank you for that 2-slide presentation.
Well, you made it 4, and Armando didn't listen to Kylie either. So
just saying.
What did he complain about?
I didn't. I was just telling you, wonderful presentation. Thank you, Armando.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So Barry, would you like to show anything? And if you don't want to show anything, would you like to say something about Steve or Armando's drawings?
I'll show something. I just pulled a couple sheets from some different sets, which are very straight up. Some of them are what I've always done or have done over the last few years, and some are some things I'm experimenting with just to test the waters with how I talk to different builders about high performance stuff. But I want to make 2 comments. Maybe we'll come back to it. Steve, I thought your slider sketch was really interesting.
Thank you.
And I have some thoughts about that, and something that's maybe not going to interest a lot of people. But when we're on the front end of a project and we're talking to a client about their performance goals, right? And you're trying to design defensively, like you start maybe with a 2x6 core, and you start building in both directions based on performance goals, right? And there's cost associated with, sort of how far you go, right? How much continuous insulation, and then you get into higher performance windows and all that. But at the same time, you're trying to design a house defensively, right? Because you want, if you have a bathroom that's 5 feet wide and it's up against an outside wall, if you change the composition of the exterior wall, you don't want to have to go back and start moving all your interior partitions around, right? So you have to establish a core and then understand how that building slides, right? Particularly in the outside direction. The only place it can be difficult if you decide to add a service cavity on the inside, and if you're not set up for that, then you got to rework the whole house. So I'd like to come back to that because I found that was really interesting.
Yeah.
Same for you, Armando. I guess I'll share. I'm going to burn through these quickly because I think it's less about what the details are and it's more about what, communicating. Why is this not showing up? I know why it's not showing up because I have an issue with a new operating system on my computer. So unless I can log back in on my other computer, I can't show them to you.
Or Barry, do you want to just email them to me? Can you email from that computer and I can share them for you?
Yeah, I'll do it right now. Sorry about that, guys.
Yeah, no, it would not be BS and beer if we didn't have a technical difficulty. It was way too smooth so far.
I had forgotten on this.
In the meantime, I was gonna say, in the meantime, while we're waiting for that, we can certainly go through. There have been a bunch of questions in here. The first question I want to throw out there is to Armando and Steve and Barry. If you guys are willing to share your slides, there's been, stuff in the chat box. Obviously, some drawings are proprietary, so if you don't want to, just let us know. But one of the first things, and I think this actually relates to a slide that Armando did, was one of our friends beforehand said, be sure to talk about putting design intent on the plans. Him and the builder that he works with a lot go through how important that is. How do you guys feel about that and communicating that? Armando, you had that slide kind of in the very beginning that was like, this is our goals. Steve, do you do that?
I mean, my stuff is a little different. I mean, a lot of you guys have heard me talk before. I place a lot of energy into talking with the builder before we go under construction and visiting the site while we're under construction. I tell people, Armando, I love your window details. Somebody asked if I have ever done window details like that. I did all the ones for Green Building Advisor. I did the original ones for the Water Management Guide at Building Science Corporation. I did the first set of step-by-step window install details 20 years ago. But I think it's more valuable that rather than sit there and draw all of those details, to show up the day the windows show up and install the first 2 windows with the builder. The zip rep is out there, the window manufacturer's out there. If we're using Siga, I have the Siga guys out there, and we install the window together. A number of things happen there. One, we get a community authorized window installation. But 2, we're able to understand everybody else's responsibility in the process and everybody else's interest and agenda in the process, right? What is the window guy's agenda? What is his interest in how this is installed? What is Siga's interest? And that educates all of us to understand, right? It's like a plumber having a conversation with the framer. It's like next time maybe the framer will do things a slightly different way to accommodate that plumbing issue or situation. And it'll make it easier for the plumber, and then they're not cutting stuff out. So there's a huge proponent of education in our industry that I think is lacking, that I place a high value on. I try and take Alex out. And for those of you that don't know, Alexandra's sitting next to me here. But I try and take her out on the job site at least once or twice a week. And even if it's just, let's go around, and I tell her, snap 20 pictures, because maybe we're not going to talk about it at the job site, but when we get back to the office or later that evening, pull up those pictures and we'll go through and we'll talk about a few things and what are the highlights there. But that's how we educate ourselves. That's how we all get knowledge. I mean, I don't know what the hell a framer's thinking unless I climb up on the roof, sit down with the framer and say, what did you think about the drawings? How was the layout? Is there any information that should have been on the drawings that wasn't? Is there anything that you really appreciated there that I should continue to do? Conversations like that, kind of cross the lines, allow us all to know what we should be doing. There's comments in there. It'd be nice if subs got to read or took the time to read the drawings. Well, the reason they read the drawings is don't read them is because we don't provide the information that they think they need. So until we have that conversation, they're going to file them in the trash can.
I have a similar way of doing things as Steve, because I also go to the job site, and usually, I have to say pre-COVID, I used to travel quite a bit and train framers, and I get involved with the truss manufacturer, I get involved with HVAC contractor and so forth. And so, and like I said, I go to the job site and do all that stuff. And so nowadays is a little bit different because, travel is more restricted because of COVID and all that stuff. So we're doing a lot of Zoom meetings, even with the subs. And we go over the details, we go over the plans with the whole crew. So we have our integrated designs through a Zoom meeting. And so that's just part of our future normal, I think. And then it's getting to a point that a lot of the subs, many of them or most of them here in our areas are Hispanic, so they all have WhatsApp, okay? And so WhatsApp, it's, they can just go ahead and point into the framing and show me through the phone, what detail they want to look at it. And so we talk about it. So, but just like Steve, I agree 100% with him. Part of it is you have to be able to be willing to go to the job site, to train people, to tell them the right way. And he gets the window manufacturer. I happen to go and do it myself and do it. I've seen few people commenting on my window details. I'll have a secret. Most of this is stuff I learned from Building Science Corporation, which I think Steve did a lot of the details and the water management guide and the builder guides and all that stuff. A lot of it, and you can see all those details at the Building America Resource Center. All this stuff is out there for free. It's not like, I made the details myself, but that stuff came from somewhere. I'm not as smart enough to invent the wheel. So I think I copy a lot of that information from, like I said, Building Science Corporation and Building America and the Building America program and so forth. So anybody can go there. You just need to, spend some time searching for that stuff.
Yeah, I think making all that stuff, reminding people that is available is great. So I think Mike is ready to share Barry's slides and let Barry join in on our discussion here. So.
All right. So I'm going to start with the general and go to the specific. This is pretty typical cover sheet where, like Armando, I've got all my assemblies and all my enclosure types called out in the middle bottom there. Yeah. So, whether it's an exterior wall type, a roof type, a floor type, and I'll do that pretty early on. I'll start assembling those even during the design development phase. So I understand, if I've got too many enclosure types going on, then I know, that may be a problem. I need to start pulling things back. So next slide. I'm not going to dwell on these too much. The other thing I like to do though is I work in an integrated 2D, 3D. I work in Vectorworks, and I like to break the whole thing down, draw the concrete, draw the framing, really do all my coordination, because, in a perfect world, if you get everything coordinated in 3D, you don't have to produce as many drawings. I found when I used to draw by hand, half the drawings I was doing was just to make sure I was finding all the problems on paper so we wouldn't find them in the field. So I do a fair amount of breaking things down, in this way. Next slide. But one of the things that I'll do just to make the scope clear on more complicated houses, like this is a diagram for one house of just the flashing scope, just all the copper that went into a house that had a stone veneer base and had copper windowsill profiles and drip caps. So yeah, maybe the profiles would have gotten modified slightly by the time we went to install them. But in a pricing set, I want to be sure that this scope is absolutely clear, so I don't have somebody saying, "Oh, I didn't realize you wanted that to be metal." So I tend to go through and try to really isolate all these elements as I go. Next one. This is a pretty typical detail sheet. This is from a passive house from a couple years ago, and my details have evolved, since that point. But when you establish all the enclosure types, I mean, the way I look at it, you want to establish all your enclosure types so you have a uniform. So like right in one of these drawings, you can see reference to the enclosure type, the overhang, the wall, and that'll refer back to pretty typical details. Then details in the end really should just be about how transitions occur, where a floor meets a wall, where a wall meets a roof. So, you can go through and find all those things and draw them. But these are pretty conventional drawings. So if you go to the next slide, Mike, I'll talk about the things I'm starting to play around with. So recently I had a couple jobs. They all sort of were at about the same point where I had intentions about how I wanted to install doors and windows. These are all the same assembly. These are all 2x6 with a 60 millimeter Gutex continuous insulation on the outside. And I know of at least 4 ways to install a window. Go to the right to the windows rather than the doors, if you don't mind. So what I did here is I made a menu sheet with starting on the left, I've got an exterior wood buck. Then I have I'm trying to remember what they are. Can you slide down a little so I can see my titles? Sorry about that.
Oh, that's okay.
All right. So yeah, on the left, I've got inboard insulation. So I've got my WRB on the back side of my Gutex. And that affects how the window might get installed. The window's pushed further back into the assembly. The next one is an outboard insulation, right? The next one is using a thermal buck, which a lot of you might be familiar with, right? It's a product right off the shelf. It's got some foam in it, but it makes for like a really nice, very low thermal bridging value. And then the last one would be a plywood buck installation. So I made this for myself to have a detail library, but I also use it to send to my builders to say, let's have a discussion about how we want to install these windows. It may be that they had a certain installation approach in the pricing set based on what I had shown, but I like to be able to go through and talk through it because different builders have different comfort levels with certain approaches. At the same time, I don't have it here, but we did some thermal analysis to really understand what the implications are on all these details. But what I like about this is just it made for some pretty interesting discussions about getting ahead of some of the problems with installing doors and windows. These are all shown with more of an American nailing flange profile, and then on the bottom left, I started to foray into European profiles. So this is the kind of stuff I do just to expand my library and my vocabulary for being able to discuss options. You can go to the next one. And then lastly, I'm working with a builder who's really enthusiastic about doing, a high performance house, but really hasn't done one before. And, as an architect, we have to be pretty careful about the difference between how to do something and what something is supposed to be. But what I've learned, certainly in terms of high performance, sequence is really important. So I made these kind of summary sheets. This sheet and the sheet that follows, you'll see in a minute, where I'm literally coding the notes in blue and red in terms of whether it's a weather barrier or an air barrier. but I'm also going through and starting to say, okay, you're at the foundation now, you're getting ready to set the floor framing. You know, you got to be ready to, you know, this is how you're going to air seal here. So if you go to the next drawing, I did a kind of a 3D version where go to the bottom, where you'll start with the foundation, and you'll see I'm taking the red and blue lines that we're accustomed to seeing in our details, and then I'm applying them as I go through the sequence of the building, starting with the foundation, then the floor system, and then working our way up to the roof. So what I'm just giving him a kind of a cheat sheet to know, okay, this is a critical, I can't be there every day. I'm going to go there as much as I can, but I'm doing what I can to really be very, you know, upfront about the stuff that he needs to be aware of to get these transitions done properly. So my point here is I'm not saying that these are great or that they're completely workable, but these are things that I'm experimenting with, like, you know, like Steve said, to get up on the roof and talk to a framer and say, so what was good, what was bad about that drawing? You know, I'm throwing these out and seeing if they stick. Penetration details, all the things that you want to be sure, you know, that people understand to get this right. That's all I got.
Oh, that's awesome. So, Barry, that or your approach reminds me of when I was a kid. I loved playing with Legos. I bet most of us did, and just I've always, or because I didn't go through a proper architectural education, I always think about Lego instructions as sort of being the gold standard of how do you teach somebody who's like 4 years old how to build something. And I feel like you've got it nailed down. You have the Lego assembly approach.
Yeah, I think in the chat box, Miguel just said we print out the CDs on a 3D printer with full color spectrum too, right? So they just print out Barry's drawing, assemble. Oh, this is how this goes together. Okay, good.
I think they're probably more complicated than they need to be, but you know, a lot of times you draw stuff, you try them out, and then you learn from it, and you go back and see what really works.
That's a great question. I was going to say, it came up in the chat box. Is there such a thing as too much information?
Yeah, there is. I mean, I think I saw early on in the chat box, there was a question about isolating specifications from, you know, into separate booklets, which I used to do, and then as opposed to having them integrated into the set. I mean, you can really sort of intimidate or just, in the end, you just really want to strip it down to exactly what they need. One of the tricky parts is there's a really big difference between a design set and a pricing set versus a construction set. Because per Steve's detail earlier, where he showed, I forget how you referred to it, doubles or twins or whatever you said it was. I mean, that's absolutely the case, right? You don't want people to have to sort through all this stuff to get to the information that you're trying to convey. But at the same time, if you want to be sure that you cover everything, I could have 30, 40 sheets of drawings, you know, on a single family residence. But I tend to break them out into an exterior, a shell set, and then an interior set. I don't even pull the interior drawings out, you know, until we've got the frame and all of that established. So yeah, there's a lot that you need to do to be sure you nail it on paper or in digital space. But you have to be careful about when and how you share it so that the information is distributed at the right time during the project. That all is very different from trying to understand what a project's going to cost on the front end, and that's a whole different discussion. So I'm not even going to go there right now, because that has a lot to say about how drawings are done and how they have to evolve through the curve of going from concept through to a construction set.
There's another aspect that I always feel that a lot of the details that I see in set of drawings from other companies is that most of those details you can get them from manufacturers anyways. Installation instructions, so why me draw them up, you know, when you can pull them up on the PDF and hand it to either the framer or the plumber or whoever it is. And so there's details that you want to put in your drawings to make sure that they get done. You know, like, for example, I don't like to penetrate the building envelope with beams or trusses or anything like that. So I'll put that detail in there because usually the framers are not used to that. And so when they see that, you know, and I'll explain it to them, they get it. But other than that, I mean, I'm not going to put a bunch of, I put it, like the window details I have is basically about the installation with the cladding, that that junction between the window itself that we're using and the cladding. But I'm not going to put a window detail because you can get it from Anderson or Pella or Sierra Pacific or whatever. So why me spending the time, doing the stuff is already done?
I have a very utilitarian question. I use colors. You guys all use colors to help differentiate things. I have a color plotter. I try to get builders and homeowners to let me plot or to pay for color plotting. A lot of builders I work with have lumber yards print their drawings and they print in black and white, and so you lose all that detail. Is it what's the solution there? Do you provide or sets yourself and not allow builder printing? Do you try to have drawings that are legible without colors, or do we rely on the colors to really be a critical communication agent?
Well, in the last presentation I made 3 months ago, I showed some details done in a SketchUp, 3D, all color. But by the time you print it, like you say, everybody goes black and white because printing a set of drawings in color is really expensive. And so you're not going to print a $300 set of drawings so it can roll on the mud on the job site. And so they'll print them on black and white. And so then you lose 80% of the thing because it's all the grays. I mean, the green and the blue and the whatever, they all show the same in gray. And so you're losing a lot. So I think seeing details like Steve does, that are 2D, and you can print them in black and white, it's a lot easier to understand, in my opinion, than doing the 3Ds.
I agree with that. The only thing that I find is that I establish, like either in Dropbox or somewhere, keep a digital project file that everybody has access to. And I'm finding that, anybody that's on the team that's invited to the Dropbox can go in and look at any detail on their phone or an iPad. And it's a more dynamic way to work, but I find that we're looking at drawings a lot that way these days. And so that gives me more confidence about using color. But the point is well taken. If nobody's going to print out full sets in color, it's way too expensive.
Yeah, I keep it in black and white usually. I use color sparingly. When I'm printing it at home, like those cheat sheets for the foundation, 11 by 17, I'll do it in color. I actually hand delivered a couple of sets to the builder for that. But you bring up an interesting point for me personally. It took me probably close to 15, 20 years to establish my line weight chart. We have an 8.5 by 11 line weight chart that we use. It's keyed to different colors. And in that chart, it has all the different weights, whether it's a hidden line or dash line or whatever. Mm-hmm. And we always communicate. Lexi will always ask, what color is that line? And I'll say it's a 13 hidden at 12-inch scale or whatever. And so our drawings are very consistent. And I think that's important. A lot of builders I work with on one builder I've been with for almost, 27 years. So he can look at a drawing and know what that line means without really talking about it. But I think, consistency and a couple of people put in there, and I think Travis, you were part of it, the Goldilocks. I think it is really important. I don't draw information for the sake of drawing information. I absolutely go ballistic when a building inspector or somebody comes back and says, well, why don't you have how many pound concrete, or they want me to rewrite the code book on my drawings. Like, hey, you should cite that the windowsill has to be 40 inches. You should do this. It's like, why the hell do we have a code book? That's not my job. It's, I should be able to mark it as an egress window. If the builder doesn't know what an egress window is, then go find out. But you're a licensed builder. You should know what that is. I shouldn't have to rewrite it. Plus, it does things like that flood the drawings. For me personally, I go across the building and say, what don't I understand if I had to put this together? What would I have to figure out? What would I have to mock up? And I literally will print out the floor plan, and then I'll draw a little red line through, okay, we need a building section here, a wall section here, a wall section here to understand different heights. It's really interesting for those of you on Instagram. I posted that drawing last night, and I don't know if anybody remembers it. I don't have it available, but it was basically 3 building sections. And what it was a builder was asking me one day, how does this relate to that? Well, as an architect, it's real easy for me to grab 3 different building sections. I just changed the color on 2, and then I superimposed them. So now we know what the relationships of fascia, mud sill, and floor and all of that was to the other sections of the house real easy, right? So you can see there's red lines, green lines, and black lines. So the black line was the main house, but he was questioning, well, how do these other roof lines and ceiling heights and everything relate to that? And so a lot of times stuff like this doesn't make it into the drawings, but it's really easy for us as architects to, I could do a drawing like that in literally about 5 minutes. That probably takes 2 or 3 hours of head scratching out of the builder. And not only that, but puts him in a position to be successful, right? Because he understands those relationships now. And he doesn't have to sift through 4 different building sections and try and guess where things are different, because we have the ability to superimpose them. I think it becomes this game of respect that you have to have enough respect with the builders for them to ask you the questions that need to be asked. And, you certainly have to respect them and give them the answers, but you have to be respectful of their time, their efforts and such, not to overburden them with information or hide things or I've actually been with architects and say, the builder, he can figure that out. No, that's not his job. It's our job. I tell everybody I work with, the drawings represent one way to do it, right? If we want to change that or alter something, I'm totally up for that. Let's have the conversation. But the drawings offer one way to build that house.
As a builder, I very much appreciate that. And I think that in the age of liability, one of the most important things that I do is do what I'm told. If you give me directions to follow, if you show me where the target is, I can hit it. If you give me a vanilla set of prints that doesn't have a lot of details, I can also fill in the blanks and do what I think is best. And since it's my liability, usually that's what I want to do a lot of the time anyhow. But at least if you show me what you want, I can call you and say, Steve, I see this detail here. You want me to do this way? I usually do it that way. Is there a reason? And we can have the conversation. But by leaving it up to the builder in a vague set of drawings, you're sharing that liability because it's not really called out. And now everyone's kind of hosed. Your client didn't get what they were expecting. The architect didn't get what they were expecting. And the builder was like, hey, I didn't know. This is how I've been doing it. And you get that same old crap that, oh yeah, I've been doing this 20 years. I've never had a callback. Well, your phone number's changed 20 times. So I think as a builder, the most important thing, and I did make the Goldilocks comment, is that I get exactly the detail that I need to do what's expected of me. You give me the target, I'll hit it. So your window details are great, but what I really want is just one. I want the one that you'll stand behind on this job with the product that you specified. And then when the client comes to me, is like, why are you doing it that way? I go, Steve said, do it this way. This is how we're doing it. I mean, you paid the architect good money to put this detail together. If you say, install windows typical to 2012 IRC, well, yeah, there's 4 different approved methods. I don't know how many AMA approved methods there are. I only like the one that I like. So that's what I'm going to do. If you don't give me the direction, then I think I just want to be fair with the subs and the framers, the builders in the audience that are kind of tuning in and going, well, hold on a second. If I do it my way, now I'm being creative. Because I've been on a site with you, Steve, where something wasn't what you drew. And you said, yeah, the framer got creative and he messed up. And then he had to fix it. And you were right. He didn't read the plan. And I've seen your drawings, so I know there's not a bunch of crap in there that you have to ignore. But if you put too much detail on a sheet that doesn't apply, or you give me a sheet of details, that's maybe one of the worst things I can get as a builder is a whole separate 3 or 4 page set that includes balustrade details and spacing on a job with no stairs. If you give me, frost connected slabs, I mean, I can go on and on about, I can complain. Nobody's here to hear that.
But I think it's about respect, Travis, right?
Exactly.
I mean, I certainly demand respect from everybody I work with, and I won't tolerate much less. I mean, I'm the first one to crack a joke out there, but also understand I'm the one that demands a lot of respect, but I also give as much respect, right? And I think one of the things that we didn't touch on that I think is really important that I've learned also, and you just touched on, don't give me a whole sheet of details. I'll always put a foundation wall section on the foundation plan.
There you go.
Right. And it's not a wall section. It's just the foundation wall up to the mud sill. And the reason for that is because many years ago, I worked with a builder and he said, Steve, I don't want to have to send my foundation guy 8 sheets to get a price from him. Can you just put the foundation detail with all the rebar and stuff on the foundation plan? So I can just send him sheet A2 and save a bunch of money. And so there's respect, right? He asked for a certain thing and he gets what he wants because we're working as a team. We all have jobs to do. The last thing, and I'm going to let Armando, kill it after that, but this is a story that stuck with me for a long time. One of the gentlemen that I grew up with out in the Berkshires was an exceptional builder, high-end builder, did work down in South County, which is where a lot of New Yorkers come and build vacation homes. He worked with an architect and I would go up there and hang out with him and be like, hey, I'm going to break out some drawings. Can you help me figure out some details? So we'd open up the drawings, we'd go through the details. And I'm like, dude, you got to call these people, the architect, and tell them you need a wall section detail. You need this, you need that. And he's like, I can't do that. And I'm like, what do you mean you can't do that? He said, if I do that, they won't give my name out as a bidder for the projects because I'm solving their problems. And I said, dude, so how do you operate? He's like, I just put more money into the bid because I know I'm going to spend 40 or 50 hours figuring this stuff out and scratching my head. And those architects only cared about if you said the window was in at 8 feet and the sill was at 2 feet. That's all they really cared about. They didn't care about the flashing detail of the window, how it got installed. They cared that pretty multi-slide was in the wall where they wanted it, and the view from the kitchen of, they were able to see the mountains, which for me is disgusting. And that's why I come down on architects quite often, because I see that kind of crap an awful lot. And it's disgusting. And it's just as disgusting as a builder that throws a set of drawings in the trash, right? It's like we have to develop this mutual respect. We can't operate that way and, against each other.
Before we let Armando jump in on that, one of the questions that came up in the chat box related to color drawings is there ever, and maybe back to related to what Travis said, is there ever an opportunity where 11 by 17 or 8.5 by 11, one single detail is worthwhile, right? We're used to doing these 24 by 36 sheets. There might be a bunch of details on it, but you can print 8.5 by 11 or 11 by 17 on an office printer in color. Like, does it make sense for us to provide some just,
when I do remodeling jobs, I do 11 by 17 sheets. I take the new work, I superimpose it over the old work as red lines. So that way the builder can easily identify, did that wall move? Because it's hard for a builder to understand, oh, we want that wall to move over 4 inches. Or does that wall move? Right? It's hard to tell that from the drawings when you're doing remodeling work. I'm sure you've had many head scratchers, Travis, where a simple 11 by 17, where the new work in a red dashed line superimposed over the old work identifies what exactly am I changing.
And that's exactly what we need. That's the Goldilocks. Thanks, man. This porridge is just right.
One thing I learned when I went to architectural school, there were no AutoCADs and no computer programs, and there was not even computers. And so
stone and chisel.
Yeah, there you go. And so by the time AutoCAD came in, I think the first AutoCAD I bought was AutoCAD 6 or 7. So I'm dating myself back in there in the 80s. So, or early 90s. But, and I had to teach myself. So I've never taken a course in AutoCAD or anything. So I've kind of learned probably the wrong way how to do things, but they work for me. And one of the things that often I see drawings in AutoCAD that it's got 50 layers. And I don't comprehend that, because I only do like 6 or 7 layers. And I'll have the walls layer and the dimension layer and the, notes layer, and that's it. I mean, like, very few. And each one of those layers has a different line weight. And so I don't have 50 line weights or 200 line weights also that I have to worry with. And it just works for me. Also, the fact that every page on a drawing, every page in my set of drawings, it's a separate drawing. Because I learned early enough that if you do all the drawings in one AutoCAD file, then a lot of times you're doing walls, but then you switch to, say, notes, and you forget to switch layers, and then all of a sudden when you start printing, you get drawings with some things missing and whatever. So I just learned that if I'm going to do the floor plan, I'll do it in one page. If I'm going to do elevations, I do it in a different page. If I'm going to, so everything has a different page. And so I don't know whether it's the right way or the wrong way. It just, I know that over 30 years it's worked for me that way. And I'm fascinated when I see drawings that it's got so much stuff in there that I just go like, wow, I get a headache just looking at it.
So I want to throw that back to Barry too, right? Barry, you got to jump in with Armando and Steve, or they'll talk the whole time. But there's been some questions in the chat box as to, are we going to go away from drawings? First of all, I'd love to hear from all of you. I still learned to hand draw, Armando, in the 2000s when I went to school, because Penn State thought that was important, that you needed to learn what you were drawing before you could jump to CAD, right? When you hand draw, you have to know what every line means, which maybe, but anyway, do you want to jump in here, Barry?
Yeah, I mean, I noticed that like you, I learned to draw by hand, and I started my practice drawing by hand and was very particular about the drawings that I would make. And, it was a lot of work. And like Armando, I taught myself CAD, right? And I don't know if I'm doing it the right way, but I do it the way that I do it. And then I switched from 2D to 3D, right? Thinking that like so that I can draw like the drawings that Steve showed, where he had that foundation SketchUp drawing and then the 2D drawing. In theory, I can do all that in one program. But of course, it can get very complicated. My point is, like, as soon as people started faxing details, right, then drawings became fragmented. Right? It wasn't about these integrated sets that you would bring around anymore. You start losing all the continuity, and you start losing all the pieces. And so now we're going through this transition where a lot drawings they're definitely in transition in terms of, we're working on them digitally. They're captured views. There's the capacity to work in three dimensions, but yeah, they can get very complicated, and it's just showing off software that's not really helping anybody who's out in the field. And so, so you ask a good question. I don't know the answer. I can tell you that I print very little out these days, that I don't even have a roll of drawings under my arm when I go to a site. I can look at almost everything that I have, and this is going to probably not sound great, but I look at everything on my phone. I carry everything that way. My problem is I have to remember that not everybody's looking at it that way. Yeah, exactly. And to Steve's point, in terms of having respect, yeah, you have to look at it from the point of view of the tradesperson that's out in the field and what they need to see. And that's an important reminder every time you go out. No, I don't think drawings are over. for a while. But the software is certainly pushing us. Not only the software, but the pace that people make decisions and make changes, make drawings become a very static medium that only represent a particular moment in time. Because my projects will change in 2 weeks. They'll change, pretty dramatically, particularly during the finish stages. And so the first thing I have to do if I go out there and I'm at a site and they're looking at a drawing, I'm going to check the date. What drawing are you looking at? Right? Is this before the kitchen updates? Is this before the, whatever might have happened over the course of a couple of weeks of changes? So that was a little bit of a meandering answer, but that's my answer.
I don't think we
there's another.
I think we need them more than ever. When you think back when I first started, you do a project, there might have been 3 or 4 subs out there doing the project. Now there's probably 25 subs out there doing the project. It's a highly fractured event that needs a lot of coordination. And while we all are, tech savvy, there's a lot of part of the building industry there's the person that understands it, and then there's the people that do it, and they're not always the same. And so it becomes quite the challenge if you don't have the drawing, I think, in hand on the job site.
Agreed.
I was going to go exactly the same way because, unfortunately, at least here in the South,
Armando, this is the only time I'm ever going to allow you to say you think like me.
90% of the people, 90% of the people that or builders that purchase or homeowners that purchase plans to build our house, they have 0 details. And so, I get phone calls or emails at least 3-4 times a week, and the very first, there's one question: how much do I charge for a set of drawings? And I mean, it's basically what they're looking is for somebody to draw walls, 4 elevations, and with that they go and get a building permit, and then they take that to the job site, and it's up to the subs to figure out how to build it. And so I think people that, that are more into the high performance homes, the architects and the designers that are more into the high end performance, not necessarily money, but higher. I think we try to do a better job with details and so forth, but that is, unfortunately, is a very small minority in our industry.
I think as an architect, Armando and Barry, I think, and Emily, certainly Mike, I think it's really important that when I draw details, I still scrutinize every detail. It might be a detail that I've used 10 times, and I still run line by line through that detail and ask myself, do I still want to do it this way? Is there something about this detail I want to change? Is there something that should be altered? Is there something I should suggest to the builder, a new material, a new way of doing it, something I saw, whatever. But I don't think we can elevate the industry and keep it moving forward if we're simply copying and pasting through life.
Agreed. I mean, you could try to establish a detail library to make your life easier as you're working through a set, and it'll never happen.
You don't.
It's like when people will say, "Oh, I like that house you did. I just want to change this one thing," right? But so it's no work for you. You just print out the plans again, but I'm just going to move this one thing. But it's the sweater. You tug on a thread and the whole thing just unravels, and you're back to the beginning, starting all over again. That's how it is. Yeah. So if it's any good, it's integrated. It's highly integrated, and so there's never going to be anything typical about it.
I saw one question up there. People asked about dimensional tolerances or accuracy. For me personally, there is no tolerance. There is. When you use AutoCAD, I draw in real space. Everything is drawn exactly the size. A brick isn't drawn at 4 inches, it's drawn at 3 5/8. Zip in a wall section for me is drawn at 7/16, not at ½ inch. And the reason for that is that way there I can adequately answer any question about the drawings from a dimensional standpoint, but it doesn't keep me in trouble. One of the first rules I taught Alex when we were drawing is never lie on a drawing. We don't edit dimension lines. They are what they are. If it's off by a ½ inch, go find out why. Don't just sit there and bump it up to, 11 foot 2 inches, because that's what it should be.
In the same vein, there was a question that came up, which was what details have to be on every set of drawings, right? What don't you go without?
I have a blanket answer for that, right? So if you take a house that's a box, right? It's got let's just make it simple. It's a slab. It's got walls, 4 walls, and it has a roof, right? So if you think about a roof as an infinite plane, and you think about walls as infinite planes, and you think about floors as infinite planes, until they meet. Wall and floor meets, wall and roof meets. That's a transition. So I strip my drawings down to, I define what all those planes are, and then I define every transition. So you need a detail for every transition that you're creating. If you don't create that detail, then that's a question and you owe them an answer. So on a simple house, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, I don't know, a half dozen details. On a complicated house, I can get 16 details on a sheet. I don't know, 48 details. So that's my quick answer.
Nope.
This is probably a good chance to interject one of my few rules about design or drafting that I've learned the hard way. Like I've learned most everything about how to draft is if it matters, draw it. I made a sign to put over my desk after skimping on drawings too many times and talking with the builder or carpenters on site and thinking everybody understood what we were doing and I didn't have to waste time drawing. Then I come back and it's not what we talked about or not what I understood or we talked about. So just, I think it's a simple rule. It's really hard to remember verbal instructions. If there's a picture, it'll happen more or less the way it's drawn, hopefully, or at least it's a basis of something to talk about.
I think everybody here too has talked about, okay, so you print your drawings in black and white, and then you go to the job site on day 1 and you get out your big red marker and you go through the details so that everybody on the team, right? So when we were talking earlier about design intent, if there are critical details like that, that's part of design intent, right? You go through those things. You're like, all right, these things are really important. We can't screw this up, guys. And then you kind of move on from there. And so that's a rule for us as architects is we got to be on site too, right? That's how we learn.
Exactly. And my conversation usually starts with the sentence, please don't take this by any means as being insulting, but I'm going to go through the numbers here like neither one of us know what the hell we're doing. Right? Because I can't assume anything. Because like Travis said, the minute I assume it, the framer got creative and he went about, we'll just match all these windows to that door. No, that wasn't what we were supposed to do. And if you look at the drawings had the number, but they just went thinking on their own. And it's not that he wasn't a good framer. It wasn't that he wasn't a good guy. It's just, I can't let people run wild.
Just like architects buildings have hierarchy too. You guys are big on hierarchy and we have the same in the field. There are things that keep the water out and they're going to get us called back. Those things are super important. And then you get down that line a little bit and that's when the plans do go back in the truck. Like, I've got it from here. The interior partition walls, we already snapped all these out. It didn't come out the way it was planned. The foundation was a ½ inch out. I got to take that ½ inch somewhere. I just take it. I don't even call the architect. That happens every day. And you're not wrong to to try and outguess that by dimensioning everything and having that conversation. And I think most builders, or at least most good framers, will have that conversation, and they'll ask the question, because it goes back to the respect, as you said, but it's not productive to have that argument later, because someone's going to redo something and it's going to be expensive. It's way more productive for everyone to stand there and listen and get it right. It's just a matter of, it's a matter of how much time you're willing to slow down, especially for a framer. That's maybe the fastest trade. They are speed.
Well, their whole life is based on efficiency.
Exactly.
Right. And you want them to be efficient, but you want them to be right. In like 3 weeks, I'm flying out to Texas. We're going to be framing a big house, and it's the whole, shut up, Armando.
Close the borders, Armando. It's not
the whole purpose of the meeting is to have a few conversations with the framer to make sure, because when he gets turned loose, he's got like 17 guys that are going to frame this house in like 2.5 weeks. And it's not something that one little problem can run like wildfire, it's European windows and stuff that he's never touched before, but he feels confident on. But it's just to make sure we're on the same page.
There's a tremendous.
You're probably putting some flanchless windows, aren't you?
Yeah, I put in real windows, Armando.
Yeah, good Lord mercy.
That touch and feel, though,
one thing that I think is underutilized is the integrated design. I really like that a lot, because at that point you can be around with the 10 most critical subs: the concrete guy, the framer, the plumber, the HVAC contractor, and we spread all the plans on the table. I guess we're doing it on Zoom now, but we ask all the subs, is there anything on this drawings that you disagree with? And is there anything that here in this drawing you can help out the guy that is coming after you? Or what about the guy that is before you? Is there anything that he needs to do to make your life easier? And that's the part that I think the good old integrated design, it really worked really well, because you're trying to make a team, not a whole bunch of individual subs doing their own thing at their own time, at whatever way they want to do it. The whole idea is to create a team. And we're all a team trying to build a house for a client. I don't care whether you're the architect or the builder or the plumber or the guy that sweeps the floors. At the end of the day, we're all have to be a team. And I have to be conscious of the guy that comes before me as well as the guy that comes after me. And if we can all help each other, like, for example, in my drawings, it will say after the framing, the first guy that comes in is the HVAC contractor. Why? Because he's got bigger things to fit in between the truss chases. I cannot have a plumbing or a drain or wire running through a chase in the middle of a truss. And so those are things that you have to communicate before people start building the house, so you don't start fixing stuff up as you are working on the job site.
And that's exactly why I say the drawings really undergo a transformation when they go from sort of pricing and planning to construction, right? Because you could completely isolate, put all your foundation details on the foundation sheet. So all that tradesperson has to do is look at those details. But if they're not mindful of who came before them and who came after them, then it's just a finger pointing episode, right? So my thing is, yes, I need to know all of it. I need to know how all of it goes, but I need somebody mirroring me on the site because I can't be there every minute. So to some extent, yes, I rely on the fact that somebody has to look at another drawing because I want them to be familiar with something else. And that's the rub. How much of that do you put people through? In the end, that should be the site super. That's the one who should know it all. and they should be delegating to different trades, and the trades shouldn't have to worry about what everybody is doing. But that's a rub. That's a hard one to resolve.
I hate to interrupt you guys. We have to be done tonight at 7:30 because Fine Home Building has another thing that's coming up, and I want each of you to be able to say your last and final thoughts. And a shout out to Jake,
I just
who
said
I think
it.
is.
I just said mine.
Oh, I know. I was gonna say, and it completely mirrors what I was gonna say here. Shout out to Jake, who's in the audience. He shared on Instagram this week a diagram of not blowing holes through our framing, right? And I feel like this is something we learned like 40 years ago, but we still have to do it, right? So you talked about that person on the job site who is just making sure that all of these things kind of come together in the end, and our drawing sets showing, you know, how this stuff is supposed to be run. Somebody said something early on, like, do you design out soffits and chases? Like, yeah, in a good drawing set, all that stuff is figured out ahead of time, and it's just managing, communicating where it goes during the job site. So anyway, I want each of you to be able to say your final words, and we have to jump off promptly at 7:30. So I'm going to start in alphabetical order. We'll start with you, Armando. Go ahead. Final thoughts on communicating details.
I think my first thing is to have details. Not having details on a set of to build a house is, it's just everybody doing its own. And you have to have an organization, and somebody has to figure out this is the way we're going to follow through. And if there's any discrepancies, we can talk about it. But other than that, let's just follow the details and the way that we need to build this house right.
Yeah, Barry.
I would just say that I learned a lot from the conversation. I'm really appreciative of the point of view. I didn't really get a chance to follow all the comments because it's too much going on, but I'll look at them after. But I can only tell you that, you know, for architects, you're hoping every set that you do is better than the one that you did last time. And, you know, this makes me want to do that. And that's what I'm going to keep trying to do.
Thank you, Barry. That's a great perspective. Steve? Close
out. Armando, I love you like a brother. Contrary to anything I've said this evening, I have the utmost respect for you. You know that, buddy.
Likewise.
I'm just going to leave with everybody. Do your damn job, right? If your job is to interpret the drawings and do it well. Don't skim over it. If your job is to deliver the drawings and draw them, then do your job. Stop relying on somebody else to figure out your job.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. We all have to do what is required of us. And I agree, Barry, we got to do better every time. You know, I learned from Steve and Armando, and every time we come on BS and Beer. I just want to say to everybody who's in the audience, we had a bunch of questions we never got to because the discussion was fantastic and it just kept going on. So jump on Green Building Advisor.
I'm sorry, I really don't, but I think this is ultimately important because chances are there's a lot of young people out there. And the difference of, I've been doing this for a long time, Armando's been doing it a long time. I get clients come to me and they say, how much to design a house? You give them a price and they say, oh, really? And I say, yeah, really. And then they say, well, is there any way we can do that, you know, less or this, or I had a guy do this. And I say, go ahead. You know, you're not going to get the same product. But the reality is when you're a youngster coming up, stop believing that you can figure it out. If you're a builder and you get a half-ass set of drawings, don't go and just say, well, I'm going to take it on my shoulders. Demand the respect from the other people, but do your job and give the respect. And demand it from the homeowner as much as from the builder. It's like, it costs a certain amount of money to do our job. And I'm sorry, you have to pay for it. If you want to build a new house, that's the cost of doing business.